In this video, we're gonna go through 6 different creative color grades for your DJI Mini 2 footage, and I'm gonna show you exactly how I did them from start to finish. All right, guys, let's get into it. Today's video is sponsored by Loupedeck, and this is their CT control surface. I've been using this for a little while now for both my editing and color grading, and this tool makes it super easy to be able to move faster when you're editing. And this works with a ton of different softwares, so you can map this out completely to whatever makes sense for you. So let's dig into some color grading ideas for the DJI Mini 2. Now, one thing you have to note before we get into color grading is that this camera only has one look. So this is the look that you get straight out of camera. It looks good, it has some contrast, it has some saturation, but to my eye, it doesn't really pop. So what I want to do is show you first how to make this footage just look better, and then we'll go through just different types of looks that you can get out of this camera. I think one of the points that a lot of creators get stuck on is this creative color grading aspect, because there's so many tutorials out there on how to get good looking footage and be able to color grade it back to what is Rec 709 or just kind of like a standard look. However, once you get into doing creative color grading, this is when you can push your footage and be able to get some interesting looks. So if you want to get a super cool look across your footage and make it feel very wintry, or you want to change your footage and make it look super warm and super sunset, give it a different color or a different look. The one style that everyone wants to do is the orange teal look, and I'll break that down in this video. I'll show you how to get this orange teal look. However, you want to get beyond just this one style of color grading. And I think one thing that we need to do as creators is create a library for ourselves of looks that we like. So you don't always just want to slap on a LUT and then call it a day. It's better to find color grades you like and start working with the tools to be able to create these color grades on your own. So one strategy I just want to talk about real quick is how you do this. So if you're watching a film or if you're watching another creator's content and you like the way that it looks, save screenshots, put them in a folder on your desktop. Save these images for later so that when you get into color grading and you want to start tweaking and playing around with your colors, you have some reference images to go back on. Things that you like, things that look good to your eye. Because that's where you're going to be able to learn how to do some interesting color grades, is by taking other grades out there and then creating your own out of that. All right, so I'm just going to turn on some music and I'm just going to show this in real time. You're going to see the color tools, my Loupedeck, and the scopes, and show you in real time how I use all of these to create these color grades. Now the key things that I did with this footage was bring down the mids, bring up the shadows, play a little bit around with my highlights, add some saturation, and then finally I changed the color temperature because the camera tends to shoot a little bit more blue, I've noticed. So what I did is I added some more warmth back into the footage and a little bit of more green in the tint, and that's kind of how I generally approach this footage if I just want to make it pop. Now the next thing I want to show you is how you change different colors within your frame. So we're going to play a little bit around with the hue and saturation curve, and we're going to use this shot here. I'll do some minor adjustments to start, and then we're going to play around with the water and change it and make it a little bit more teal. some minor contrast adjustments, the same type of thing, bringing those mids down. Also, the highlights needed to come down a little bit. One thing with this camera, when you're shooting stuff that's super bright, it tends to not be able to color grade very well. So I try to keep my exposure kind of at 80 and below if you're looking at like a waveform chart. However, when you're in camera shooting, you don't have that. So you have to use your histogram and your overexposure warning. So I use those two tools when I'm flying, and I just make sure that nothing's overexposing and that I bring some of those highlights back and down a little bit so that when I get into color grading, I can tweak it much better. So what I did with this is just add a hue saturation curve. I targeted the water specifically using the eyedropper, and then I changed it to make it a little bit more teal. Now let's take this a step further and let's push this into that orange teal contrast that a lot of people are striving for when they're creating their color grades. The orange teal look is kind of like the classic cinematic look because orange and teal are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and orange red is where your skin tones typically sit. So you want to make sure that you have color contrast, and I'll put another video down below in the description that talks about why this is important, but you want color contrast, so you're going to want teal, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum. So let's play around with this footage a little bit more. So to be able to create this color contrast, especially for this scene, all I had to do was target the warmer tones within this footage and be able to push that more into the oranges and reds while the rest of the footage stays in the teals. And I'm using the hue saturation to play around with this. I'm using hue to change the color and then the saturation to bring up the intensity so you see that contrast more. And when you look on my vector scope, you can see there's a clear line from the reds all the way down to the teals and cyans. That's going to create that color contrast. And the more saturation you put in the image, the more that you're gonna see that contrast and really see the dynamics between the really orangey parts and the really teal parts. And now when you bring it up to the extreme, you can really see this change from the orange to the teal. I don't know how often you're gonna wanna use this look, but if you're doing something like tropical, having this really crazy contrast with lots of saturation does make the footage pop sometimes. You could also go the other way and bring your saturation down and make it more muted. However, if that's really bringing out too much saturation, then you can go into your highlights and then go to your shadows, bring down your shadows, go to your midtones, bring up your midtones. And now it's a more subtle look, but you still see that color contrast. So you can see how you can start tweaking the different elements within your footage to be able to get this color separation and create these different looks. So one thing I want to mention before we get into the next color grade is that the Loupedeck makes it super easy to work within your software. So how this system is set up is pretty cool. You have 6 twisty dials on the side, and each of these click as well. You have all of your buttons around. You have 1 through 8. You have 6 buttons on either side of this main jog wheel, and this jog wheel is a button on its own. Now you can press FN and you get a whole new set of buttons. So everything has 2 different button variations in every mode. Now with this screen, you can change out everything on this screen and all this text is replaceable. So one thing that's really cool, I'll go into my color grading menu. On the bottom here, I have different submenus of this color grading menu. So you can go into my workspaces, and this is toggling on my waveform and my vector scopes. Now I could go back to my color grade, I could go to the color boards, and you can see all the tools that you have for your color boards. Go back, go to color wheels. This is what I mainly use, and you can see I have master dials, shadows, midtones, highlights, and I can map this out to these dials on the side or this master in the middle. And I use a combination of the dials on the side and the master because then I can tweak both like midtones and highlights at the same time. And when you're color grading, it makes it super easy to be able to tweak your colors when you're able to do 2 things at once. So this is a great tool to make it easier to edit. And the one thing that I really like about this control surface is that it's so small that you can bring it anywhere that you go. It's a great tool to add on to both your keyboard and your mouse. And between this, you can have a really fast creative workflow. All right, so let's get into color grade number 3. I really want to show you how to create some cool tones with your footage. So the goal of this color grade was to create more of this cool winter look. So what I really wanted to do was desaturate and pull out all the warm tones, not completely get rid of them, because if you just pull them out and shift everything into the cool temps, then you can do that by just pulling the temperature slider, but then everything's blue. Rather, what you want to do is you want to go through and tweak the different colors. So the warmer tones I brought kind of into the greens, more into the teals, and then I shifted my temperature into the cool tones, and then my tint a little bit more into the greens, and then I played around with the colors in my hue and saturation curves. And you can see as I'm grading with the Loupedeck, I'm just kind of flowing between the different tools and playing around with a little bit here, a little bit there, and it's really, you're dialing it into your eye. Now obviously you can use things like your vector scope and your waveform to use tools to be able to judge your color grade. However, when it comes to creative looks, a lot of times you're gonna be doing this by eye, and then you refer to your tools once in a while. All right, so the next grade I want to do is something completely different. Let's go push it more into the warm tones, and also let's give it a kind of washed out look. All right, so the next look I want to do is kind of opposite of the cool one that I did a little bit earlier. This is a warm tone. Now I'm going to take this same shot and we're going to do something specific with the sky to be able to get the blues out of it. So let's dig into this one and start tweaking the colors. So with just a few tweaks, you can create some really interesting looks out of this footage, and it really just comes down to practice. The more that you play with this footage, the more that you practice, the more you'll be able to push it around and be able to do some cool things with it. Now the last shot I want to show you is a sunset and how you can tweak the colors, create different looks with it. So playing with sunsets, you could push it more into the purples and create a completely different look, or you could push it more into the warmer side of things and make a look that way. Color grading really comes down to you as the creator, and it comes down to creating something that you think looks good. I think one of the keys is come up with a list of different looks that you like, keep those in your back pocket, and start playing with your footage and really tweaking it. Now guys, I highly suggest you check out the Loupedeck CT. It's a great tool if you want to be able to do more creative color grades and really just speed up the workflow. I think this thing works great whether you're a Final Cut user, Premiere user, you're doing photo editing. Basically, you can map this out to the software that you use and you can do some cool creative stuff with it. So I'll put a link down below in the description to where you can find out more information about the CT. And guys, I'd love to hear from you down in the description. What are some other videos you want to see around the Mini 2? And next, I highly suggest you check out this video right here, or this one. This one's another color grading technique that you can use for Mini 2 footage, and this one is your complete beginner's guide to the DJI Mini 2. All right, I'll see you over there.